Tyson. News! Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Amanda Serrano believes Showtime Showdown is bigger than Katie Taylor fight. Why is her name always in your mouth? The Mexican. A super bantamweight world champion moving up to challenge for Serrano's 3 world feather titles certainly isn't as big a name as Taylor, and a fight with her wouldn't generate anywhere near the hype a matchup with the Irish star would. Mercado doesn't bring the same level of threat as the trailblazing, undisputed lightweight world champion, nor does she bring anywhere near the same level of finance to the table. Yet the New York-based Puerto Rican believes it's a bigger bout.
This shit is getting ridiculous.
She was quoted as saying, "Because this is a breaking point, I think, for female boxers. Showtime pay-per-view, you know. This is a big step for female boxing, and I'm truly excited to go out and put up a great performance. And, you know, I mean, every fight is a big fight. And especially that fight with Katie Taylor is going to be a great fight. But I think this is a breaking point for females." So let's address the obvious stuff first. This is not a fight on the scale of a Taylor fight.
No.
By any stretch of the imagination, it's not.
No.
It's not a bigger fight than the Taylor fight. It's not a more important fight to women's boxing than the Taylor fight. What this is Amanda Serrano riding Jake Paul's wave. Because the audience that's set to tune into this card and its main attraction, those ain't boxing fans. True blue boxing fans don't care about Jake Paul.
And the other guy.
The other guy's an MMA fighter, Tyrone Woodley. If he has a following, if there's someone interested in seeing what it is Tyrone Woodley is going to do, that in all likelihood is an MMA fan, not a boxing fan. And what you're doing is riding those guys' wave to get yourself a little payday. And this doesn't fool anybody. This fight isn't anywhere near on the same scale as the Taylor fight, and it's not as significant, not as relevant to the sport of women's boxing as that fight would have been. What Amanda Serrano's been doing the last couple of years is trying very hard to find an alternative.
Something other than a Taylor fight to get her paid.
She's spent the better portion of her career hopscotching through weight classes for vacant titles, weight classes that actually had active world champions in them, yet for some reason Amanda Serrano never got around to fighting very many of them.
Sometimes that was her fault, sometimes it wasn't.
Amanda Serrano's been around for a long time, and only now is she placing any kind of emphasis on unification matches and becoming an undisputed champion, an alternative to the Katie Taylor fight that she walked away from.
That's what that is.
With the difference being that in any one of those unification matches that Amanda Serrano is pursuing in the featherweight division, she would be the betting favorite. The only chance she's actually had to participate in a genuine, bona fide super fight, a 50-50 fight. That's the fight she walked away from. And that says it all right there, doesn't it? Even worse is that Amanda Serrano isn't actually having much luck unifying the featherweight division. She didn't get the fight with Jelena. She's having issues with Erica Cruz. Sarah Mahfoud, God only knows what she's doing.
She hasn't actually had a unification match.
Amanda Serrano only recently sought to unify the women's featherweight division as an alternative to the Katie Taylor fight she walked away from, and since then, she hasn't actually had a unification match. Admittedly, I wouldn't put all the blame on her. The champions seem hesitant to fight her, but better still, if your goal was to use becoming an undisputed champion at featherweight as an alternative to a Taylor fight, that's really not working out. Your last fight was against a super bantamweight, not a featherweight. And this fight you're about to have, that's another super bantamweight.
Another one.
Even in closely knit boxing cycles, the name of Jamie Mercado doesn't hold the same weight as the name of Katie Taylor, and everyone knows that. So why is Amanda Serrano trying to gaslight the boxing community by saying that this fight with Jamie is bigger than the Taylor fight? Bigger to who? Jake Paul's fans or Tyrone Woodley's? Because those are the only people that are paying to see this card.
That's the paying public that's financing all of this.
I gather that Amanda Serrano is likely to make very good money from this Jamie Mercado fight. I gather that she's probably going to make more than she made fighting Daniela Bermudez on Ring City, USA. Obviously more than she made fighting Diana Santana or Simone de Silva. I think Amanda Serrano is set to make some good money from this fight, but make no mistake, that's not because of the fight she's about to have, that's because of the card it's on. Jake Paul versus Tyrone Woodley. All the finance, all of the attention that the card is getting has everything to do with a YouTuber and an MMA fighter.
That's what's paying for all of this.
That's what's making all of this possible. You know, I don't want to be a spoil sport. I don't want to rain on somebody's parade. But there's no way you broach this subject wholeheartedly and honestly and don't address the facts. And the fact of the matter is, this is not a bigger fight than the Taylor fight.
This is not a more historically significant fight than that fight would have been.
Because if it were, you wouldn't still be talking about it. You wouldn't still be talking about a Taylor fight. Not if this fight is bigger than that one. Not if this is an adequate alternative. What this is pure happenstance. A fortuitous occurrence for Amanda Serrano to be able to make an appearance on this card.
It's happenstance.
To make herself some money, maybe gain herself some exposure, some spillover, that hopefully some of Jake Paul's fans and perhaps some of Tyrone Woodley's fans will see Amanda in action and become fans of her as well. That's the hope. But make no mistake, this is not a bigger fight or a more relevant fight than the Taylor fight was. This is not an equal alternative.
This ain't no substitute.
You're dreaming, is what you are. Trying to gaslight, hoodwink, fool people into thinking that this fight is on par with that one?
Anything but that tells me is she's not serious.
She's not serious about the Taylor fight. And that's what I've always thought. Those of you that follow the channel will already know that. I'm not convinced that Amanda Serrano ever actually wanted that fight. What she wanted was the benefit of having the big machine behind her, a major promoter. And she used that big machine up until it was time to deliver on that promise, up until it was time to knuckle up and fight Katie Taylor. And once it was time to do that, she bailed.
And she's been trying to explain it away ever since.
There's no other way to put it. I want to like Amanda Serrano. I want to root for her. But there's no way I can broach these subjects without being honest. In other news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, a very surprising admission from Bob Arum on the COVID outbreak in Tyson Fury's camp. I really screamed at all of them. It was a complete fuck-up. There was no precaution taken. A lot of it was our fault. They, Wilder's team, did the right thing. They're to be commended. We didn't. Mixed feelings on these comments from Bob. I'm sure many of you out there might have mixed feelings hearing and reading them as well, because there are a lot of people that are convinced that Tyson Fury didn't even have COVID-19. There are a lot of people that are convinced that what all of this was an effort to buy the fight more time in order to promote the fight, because there was no buzz around it. People have seen it 2 times already with these same 2 guys. Tickets weren't moving the way that they wanted them to move, and they used a rather convenient excuse to postpone it.
Move it.
Just being honest, there's people out there that don't believe Fury had COVID. For those individuals, yeah, they might be hearing this and reading this, and they may have mixed feelings about what's being said. If we take it all at face value, Bob Arum's comments, Tyson Fury's comments, in reference to the postponement, at minimum what it accents is dissension.
They're not seeing eye to eye.
If you take what's being said at face value, there seems to be dissension between Bob Arum and Tyson Fury. If you ask Bob, it's Fury's fault and his team's. Whereas if you ask Tyson Fury, nothing's ever his fault.
It's been that way for as long as I can remember.
From the time that Tyson Fury found his way out of that Vladimir Klitschko rematch, he had some kind of a sprained ankle, then all of a sudden he was mentally unfit. He walks away from the sport for roughly 2 years, relinquishes the alphabet titles that he was in possession of, only so he can turn around and call Anthony Joshua a paper champion.
Saying that nobody ever beat him for those titles.
Saying that nobody ever took those titles from him in the ring, whilst not highlighting that they couldn't have taken those titles from you in the ring because you vacated them, because you sat out for 2 years. I mean, where is the accountability when it comes to Tyson Fury? It comes as no surprise to me that Tyson Fury is once again saying, it's not my fault. Yeah, it's never your fault.
It's always someone else's fault.
Always. And what's curious about the dissension, the comments from Bob Arum and the comments from Tyson Fury, is that looks like they're playing the blame game in full view of the public eye.
Bob's saying it was a complete fuck-up.
That there were no precautions taken, and you have to wonder how that affects people's perceptions of the fight and people's perception of Tyson Fury, because we can't forget, Bob is Fury's promoter.
He's trying to sell us this guy.
And he's essentially trying to sell us this fight, this trilogy. But it's very curious that he's taking this stance openly,
publicly,
while trying to sell us this fight. You have to understand, this goes back to what I said in a previous video about this trilogy. who exactly out of these two fuck-ups are you supposed to root for? The sore loser who's been making excuses for the last, 15, 16 months? Or this guy?
This fuck up.
It's like amateur hour with these guys. One bumbling idiot versus another bumbling idiot.
People are just tired of it.
The boxing community's fed up, and when that fed up boxing community sees Bob Arum assigning blame to the Fury people, the Fury camp, for the fight's postponement.
Doesn't that make the fight an even tougher sell?
I mean, doesn't it? Doesn't it make it all that much more mentally exhausting watching this melodrama play out in full view of the public, in full view of the boxing community's eyes, that they're ready to move on. They wanted to see something else, want to see something else, and we're still here.
Yeah, I don't know if any of this is going to help ticket sales.
I don't know, what about this is supposed to make this three-peat, this rerun, this trilogy, an attractive enough purchase that people should pay to see it, that people should pay per view or pay to be there? The whole thing is a pain in everybody's ass. I read a recent set of quotes from Shelley Finkel, Deontay Wilder's longtime manager. He confirmed that they never received any step-aside offers from Fury's team. A portion of the article reads, Finkel has now shed light on the situation. He spoke to Sky Sports and said, "We never looked for step-aside or anything." However, he then admitted that if he were in their shoes, even he would consider making an offer for Wilder to step aside and earn a fraction less than what they would have actually earned. Finkel then confirmed that the other never came. He said, "It never came to that. It's just silly. If it were me, I would have spoke to my fighter and said, look, instead of making $100 million, make 90. A lot more than he's going to make fighting Usyk, for sure, and we hope to disrupt the party."
Fighting Usyk.
Fury ain't fighting Usyk. Joshua's fighting Usyk.
What, you was expecting Joshua to pay you to step aside?
Must have been a Freudian slip or something, because if anybody was supposed to pay anybody to step aside, it would have been Fury that would have had to pay Wilder to step aside, not Anthony Joshua. What Fury and Wilder got going on is their fucking business.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a misquote or what.
People are tired of keeping track of these two guys, these two teams, and keeping track of who said what and when they said it and what that means and what inferences we can make, because ultimately it all results in the same thing. The same fucking tired three-peat, the same fucking tired trilogy with the same two fuck-ups.
What it all means?
Tyson Fury saying that it's not his fault, whereas Bob Arum is saying it is, and meanwhile Shelley Finkel is saying that these guys made no effort to get Deontay Wilder to step aside. They never actually made him a step-aside offer, which, that much we knew. When that arbitrator's ruling came down, Bob made it crystal clear they weren't going to be paying anybody to step aside, and Tyson Fury echoed that sentiment, so...
That's not exactly new news.
Let me tell you something. The average boxing fan these days has to play both lawyer, forensic investigator.
And for what?
And for what? For a fucking fight that was supposed to happen this summer, but now it's going to happen all the way in the fall? I mean, people ain't got the patience for this stuff. What excitement does this entire ordeal bring to the heavyweight division? What excitement does it bring to the sport of boxing?
Oh, so they're playing the blame game.
But who cares? It's become so uninteresting, it doesn't even really matter who's at fault at this point. And finally, per tweet from Michael Benson, Vasyl Lomachenko's next fight could come on December 11th. Bob Arum has said. He added that there should be soon a resolution to the Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos Jr. dispute, which sees the fight go ahead on a Triller pay-per-view in the U.S. in September.
That's the ideal scenario.
Teofimo Lopez gets to make the kind of money that he's wanted to make, that George Kambosos Jr. gets the title shot that he's worked towards for so long and has been waiting for, and that the fight happens, that it actually takes place, and Lopez makes good on his arrangement, his one-fight arrangement, with Triller. This is the ideal scenario, that they can sort all of this out to get everybody what they want internally.
What they want out of the deal.
Nobody's got to go to Australia. Nobody's got to vacate the IBF title. Nobody's got to get taken to court. That they can deliver on this thing. And I will say that the one thing that
can't get back,
Teofimo Lopez can't get back, is the time. The amount of time it's taken to bring this very simple, very run-of-the-mill,
ordinary,
mandated title fight into fruition. It just shouldn't have taken this long. And if it did, it's because he was more worried about the short game than the long one.
So focused on getting a big price for this fight.
Now, because of the amount of time it's taken to bring the fight into fruition, if it does in fact happen in September, it'll be the only fight he's had this entire year.
Is this the kind of fight that should take that long to make?
I maintain my original position. It would have been a lot more simple to simply do the fight at Top Rank's price, because it wouldn't have costed you as much time. You could have made more money this year if you fought more than once, and now, based on the amount of time it's taken to do this goddamn fight, it's gonna be the only fight you have, the whole of 2021, on the heels of his big win over Vasyl Lomachenko.
If Top Rank would have got to do the fight, he would have fought at least 2 times this year.
The way it breaks down, he's capping the year off with George Kambosos Jr. He could have started the year off with George and ended it with that Vasyl Lomachenko rematch, what could have been a Vasyl Lomachenko pay-per-view, which would have gotten Teofimo a substantial amount of money. But that's not the way it's happening, and it just is what it is. So with that, Teofimo Lopez will cap off the year of 2021 with George Kambosos and George alone. Vasyl Lomachenko will have fought 2 times if this story checks out in December. Who against? That's anybody's guess. He's not a champion anymore, so it's not like he's got any mandatories to satisfy. He's free to choose. Maybe he chooses a lighter touch, someone to keep the machine well-oiled en route to what could be a Lopez rematch early the following year, in 2022. You have to wonder about the state of Teofimo ahead of what could be a second Vasyl Lomachenko fight, because he hasn't fought in a while.
He's gonna fight George.
And he's got to make the weight to fight George. He's got to make the weight to hang on to those belts. I vaguely recall some concerns ahead of what was the Lomachenko fight, before it actually happened, that Teofimo wasn't going to wait around forever because it was getting harder to make 135 pounds.
These are genuine concerns.
It's because these concerns were expressed before he even fought Vasyl Lomachenko. The night of the Kambosos fight, if it happened in September, it will have been 11 months since the Lomachenko fight, just 1 month short of a year. If he fights Vasyl Lomachenko for a second time, sometime in 2022...
It'll have been longer than that.
I do wonder how easy or uneasy it will be for Teofimo Lopez to make the contracted weight of 135 pounds and continue to reign as this division's unified and/or undisputed champion. And even if he makes it, does he struggle to make it? And does that struggle manifest itself in his performances moving forward? You have to wonder.
It's a lot to think about there.